Okay, this does show that we're live, so I am going to double check because today's been a tech challenging day already.
No, that's sometimes what happens.
I feel like for the number of times we've already been doing this, like it should be a lot smoother, but
Technology.
it never quite works right.
The number of times we
Like that. Perfect. Well, as people are starting to see this and have begun to join in, I'll go ahead and get at least the basic housekeeping started for our broadcast before we move into our guests for some timely updates. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever it is that you are taking the time to get caught up on our videos. You can find these videos, of course, all in the video section here on our Facebook page or YouTube platform. And one thing that you may or may not have already done is not only like the page, but follow our pages. So if you follow the Facebook page, you get alerted when we go live with videos. If you are subscribed to YouTube, it actually lets you know that a video is available for you to rewatch later on. So those two are great ways to get notified whenever we go live into the future or when we've been live in the past. If you're not with us and you had questions or comments or thoughts, you can always give us the hashtag replay in the comment section where we'll be able to see what that comment was or that question and get back to you in a timely manner. The couple of ways that you can engage with us, of course, is by directly commenting in the comment section. Whether you're viewing this on Facebook or YouTube, you have the full functionality to let us know any remarks that might come to mind, to share good morning pleasantries. If there are things that you would like for our guest to speak to that he hasn't spoken to, the comments is where we pull that information from. So feel free to type in and let us know who's tuned in or let us know your thoughts or questions. The other way you can, of course, engage with us is by hitting the share button on this video. Doing so allows others in your network to see that we're live and can also begin to join us and hopefully get some of their information that they're seeking or questions answered that may be at the top of their mind. Now, on Mondays, we always reserve those for city updates, and we generally hear from either our mayor, mayor pro tem, other councilors, and sometimes our city manager. Wednesdays is an opportunity for you to hear from some of our newer partners, of course, so you can see the faces behind those local businesses that make them who they are and how you can support them. And then once a month on Friday, we reserve that for updates from our county. Generally, it's by our Jefferson County Commissioner for our district or our area, and that's Commissioner Tracy Kraft Tharp. So that's the way the run of the show works. I thank you so much for always hopping on and engaging with us and letting us know when you're on here. I see Emilio. Thank you, Emilio, for reacting. Thumbs up, hearts, emojis, any of those allows us to see who you are that's tuned in real time. Now, today, of course, we have with us our Mayor Pro Tem, David DeMott. And Mayor Pro Tem, thank you so much for making this fit your schedule. I know you have a busy one, and then I've run into some tech issues as of late that have kind of hindered our ability to keep these going. So now that you're with us and on here, I'm going to turn this over to you to start sharing with us some of the information you'd like to get out there. And I'll do my best to comment in the chat section to kind of complement what you are referencing.
Yeah, thanks, Juliet. Always a pleasure to be with you. Been summertime, so it's busy. A lot of special events going on. I know that the chamber participated last week in Top Taco, which was a great time. I'm glad the city. This is the second year that we've done that. Hopefully, we do it again next year. But lots of our local vendors participated in that. As far as different restaurants and stuff, it was a lot of fun. Coming up this weekend is the Westy Brew Fest, and I did drop a link for you to share for that. It looks like, from if I look at the website, it looks like tickets are still available, but that's a lot of fun as well. I know in the past some years they've had up to 40 different breweries participate. I'm not sure where we're at this year, but that's going to be this Saturday, and that is always a good time as well. Um, so on to like what kind of business we got going on. I know that last week we weren't able to do this and we were going to, so I wanted to share kind of an update from what we talked about at the study session last week and kind of what we're looking on to are focusing on this evening with our council meeting, because tonight's an actual council meeting. So last week in our study session, we had our partners from CU Boulder that basically went over where the economy is. And so I shared a link with that as well. If you would post that for people to go look at that agenda, they can see the slides that were shared, as well as if you want, you can go to the city's YouTube and review that presentation. But they basically kind of gave us an update on where we think that the economy is going. I will say that they see it performing so far better than they had anticipated 23 being. There's still concerns, I think, generally from a lot of folks, whether or not we're going to see a recession or not, and what level that potentially could be. And so their outlook has changed to a more positive look. And why that's important for the city is we're trying to decide what we think the right number to target for budget next year is going to be, because we're going into budget talks. So trying to match up what kind of tax revenue the city thinks it's going to get versus not. And they kind of break that all out. As you know, we're heavily sales tax driven, but there are, use taxes that we get. There's also a very small amount of property tax that the city gets, but they really broke that all down. Their recommendation was actually to go with an optimistic number. They had kind of a pessimistic, conservative, optimistic. I don't think conservative is the word that they used, but I think they used baseline was what they had used. And, the staff recommendation and our partners were to go optimistic. A couple of council members were comfortable with that, but the majority was not comfortable with it. And as far as, we wanted to kind of feel it out is really what the majority had decided. And we, the direction we gave was to go with kind of that baseline, which again, I'll say is actually a little bit better than what we thought it was going to be the last time that they visited us and we had this conversation. So the city's in a good place, and that is important to people because that goes into how we pay police officers, pave roads, do sidewalks, all the different things that we do as a city. So that's an important conversation when we look at what our budget priorities are going to be for 24. And if you also remember, traditionally the city used to do a 2-year budget cycle, and since COVID, we've been doing a 1-year budget cycle. We originally did it because of COVID, and it has worked out for us, so we're continuing that. The other thing that we looked at last week that you can see in the slides, if you go to that last week's agenda, was they had an update on the parking. So if you've been following us, we had added some FTEs to parking and moved parking enforcement to community development. That does not mean that the police department does not still have the same authority to ticket. It just means that we are using basically a parking group that is looking specifically at those kind of violations. And so they, when we put that in place, we asked for a 6-month update, and we got that 6-month update this last week. And so one of the big things, like the number one violation type, was invalid plates, which I get a lot of complaints about. I think I see a lot of them myself. I saw one that was like 6 to 7 months old, and I mentioned it to one of our officers, and they said that's really not even that bad. So during COVID, if you remember, they kind of were really laxed on that because all the departments were closed and getting in. So it is important that folks know we're actually starting to, and we're not alone, that across the state people are starting to get ticketed for that. So you are expected to go in, and that builds up. It's whatever is in their rears. If it's been 2 years and you're supposed to get licensed, you're going to have those fees for the last 2 years. So that's important to see. The other thing, you can see some of the other RV parking was another one. Abandoned vehicles, parked the wrong direction. Those were kind of the higher level ones. So we are seeing some positive feedback. Of course, they are trying to educate people because, some things that maybe we have been laxed on enforcing, we want to give people the opportunity to understand, why that's a safety concern, and give them a chance to change the behavior, not necessarily always with a fine, but ultimately, we do have that in our toolbox, and that is something that is going to be used. So the other thing that I would mention that they brought up in that conversation was a key takeaway was compliances went up, and they from their measurements since they've started ticketing or educating residents. The other piece of it is if you look at our code, if you have an RV and you have it on a residential street, you have a certain amount of time in order, I think it's 72 hours, in order to basically get your camper ready so that you can go out camping. And then when you get back, you have another 72 hours, once it's back on that street again, in order to clean it up and go store it. Because those aren't supposed to stay on residential streets. Where there is a hole in our code is that isn't in the commercial areas. And so they are going to bring back a thing to make that uniform so that we're not, chasing campers out into, in front of, a business park because there's no rule about that. So they're going to make that uniform so we have that same rule across the board and, in all the different areas in the city. So I'm going to pause before I go into tonight and see if you have any clarifying questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Mayor Pro Tem. I have, as we were kind of chiming in, and I see people hopping on and off with us to the broadcast. For those that have been with us from the start, we spoke about the upcoming Brewfest and the tickets, where you can find information about it that's taking place on the 29th. That has been dropped into the comment section, quickly flashing it for you over here. We also spoke about the Top Taco event that was last week and the upcoming council meeting that's this evening. And for those of you that are interested in finding some of the information items, agenda items, and other notes for reference, you can find that by following this link that's also included in the comment section for you as well. Some of the key highlights were the budgets coming up and the path towards what that looks like by staff and by council were also discussed. And then most recently, we were talking about enforcement of plates and expired plates in specific, and raising awareness for folks that this is happening. People are checking these up, and you should not delay it because you might show up and find it significantly higher than what you expect. The comment came to us from one of our YouTube viewers, Mayor Pro Tem, and okay, here's what I'll go. And this was right around the time that we were discussing plates expiring and that code enforcement's been going out. There have been a lot of complaints by the general public about this, primarily in parking lots. I know we've seen it come through on parking garages and things like that. And so Dave's curious as to why, this has become such a real problem. And he's gone on to explain, if it's come up without fines, why don't we issue fines until there are 3 or more violations deep? So his ask is, why has this become such a large problem that there has to be this heightened focus by enforcement around it? And is this warranted, even if there hasn't been prior offense of other things? Hopefully I didn't butcher that question, Dave.
No, I understand the intent of his question. So I will tell you that this is out of citizen feedback and citizen call it complaints. We do get a fair amount of the interactions are from folks calling in complaints about people not parking properly. There is a proactive piece of this where our parking enforcement is driving around, and if they see someone violating code, then we are going to make contact. Just like with our police department, though, the city's TAC is about changing behavior and making sure that people are operating safely. We have those codes and rules in place for safety reasons. I'll give you an example of an area where I have got a lot of concern and feedback from, where we actually had a specific meeting. The dog park on Sims over in my neck of the woods. There are a lot of illegal parking off of Sims in the places where people park, even though the cities even tried to put rocks and stuff where people can't pull in to the dirt there. It's a very popular dog park, and totally understand why people want to go there. Unfortunately, those areas are not safe to park because of the way the traffic flow is. So when people try to pull back out, that's unsafe for the people who are driving down Sims and the people who are, illegally parking. So that's one area where there was citizen concern behind us getting a little bit more serious about parking violations. I will say the other thing is is the abandoned vehicles and campers, as well as invalid plates. The invalid plates is one that we get a lot of complaints about. So I mean, you have to wonder if people haven't plated their car for 2 years, do they have insurance? Like, there's a lot of other pieces of that because that's part of what we do here in the state of Colorado is you have to prove you have insurance in order to get plates. So I totally understand. We don't want to be super heavy-handed in my mind, but we also want to, the general welfare of the city is something we have to be concerned with. And so it was off a lot of citizen feedback that we've made some of these adjustments. And I would say nothing we do is ever going to be 100% well received, but in general, it has addressed a lot of the complaints that we've got.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mayor Pro Tem. And Dave, we appreciate the question that comes through. Sometimes it's multifaceted as to why things are happening. So if there are any additional comments or questions that come to your mind as you are viewing this, and I know we're getting a couple more people that hop on and hop off with us, please feel free to continue to type in those thoughts. And I don't see any additional questions so far, Mayor Pro Tem, if you would like to continue forward. And if there is something else, I'll try and break up for conversation for it.
Yep, great. And I do appreciate the questions if people have them. And if you would actually make sure, before we're done, we'll make sure to drop my email and my phone number in the.
Yeah. Do we want to go ahead and do that now while we're on the subject?
Yeah, let me add it to you so you can easily do it.
Yeah.
Getting into tonight while I type here. So tonight is a city council meeting. And just making sure I spell my own name right. So tonight we have a couple things. One of the things that we have tonight is a public hearing on a couple lots in the Bradburn area. So if you want to see that, you can look at the agenda, or you can come join us tonight on that. We will be having a motion over the community block grant program for this year. A couple things on some water stuff, and then second reading. This is one I wanted to share about, so because I've got a lot of questions about this one too. So tonight is going to be the second reading of a change to the Westminster Municipal Code, doing away with people needing to get dog licenses. You still need to have your dogs vaccinated. That's still a requirement to have a pet in the city, and all our other rules, such as limits of how many pets you can have in one residence, those still apply. But this was something that Councilor Baker brought up, I think, originally when he was on council back 2013, 2014. And if you look at, as we looked at the data and talked with our folks in animal management, what you find is I think it was only about 20% of people who had animals actually were even in compliance with that. If you look at what you use the animal license for, some of it's to reconnect lost animals with their owners. That's not really something that's like the last resort, it sounds like, and from what they told us. It's more often the chip that they use, because most animals are chipped now, or social media. There was just a lot of overhead with the dog licensing as we actually looked at the request to not do dog licensing. That made it not really make sense. Some other municipalities, and I don't remember which ones off the top of my head, have either done this or are looking at doing this. And so, if you look at the fact only 20% are, in the amount of money that, we have to send to the animal shelter versus what we get off that, it just made sense to us to not do it, especially since it didn't seem like it was that useful from an animal management perspective. So that is something that residents no longer have to do. Again, you do need to get vaccinations if you have an interaction with animal management and your animal's not vaccinated, that you can show that you could still get cited for that, but not for the needing the dog license. And so I do think that's a value add for the residents of Westminster. And I don't remember what day we had that conversation. If anybody wants more information about it, email me and I'll find out the day so you can watch the conversation. But it was kind of telling as we went through it and talked with staff and worked with them. But that will be finalized tonight.
Okay.
And that was the amount of things that I was going to cover today. So I don't know if you have any other questions or anything that I could share with you.
Do we want to clarify for folks that may not know about the CDBG funds and how what has that has looked like historically, or what that's used toward, for them to
Sure,
have a
sure.
more
So
general idea?
CDBG is community block grants, and so what that is, that's money that comes from the federal government, and it has to be spent in certain areas that are, different levels of low income. And so it may not be the whole area, but there's a calculation that they use that says this area has, X% of income in this category, and we get those dollars and we can use them for things in those areas. Some of the things that they've been used for in the past, trees down in historic Westminster, some street, I think they're actually sidewalk improvements in down in historic Westminster. They've been used towards housing in some instances. We have a program for folks that maybe need a new water heater that earn a certain income level that live in, the affected areas, where we can basically say your water heater goes out, we can give you these grants in order to help with that, or emergency home maintenance kind of things. And part of that process for the federal government is every year there's an allocation that says this is how much we think that your area is going to get, and then we go through the process of looking at what qualified opportunities there are for us to spend those dollars. And there's a public component of it where we have to get feedback. We go through the feedback process. They take some feedback from both the public and council, and then they come back with recommendations that we have to approve to allocate those dollars.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that, Mayor Pro Tem. It looks like Dave is tuned in and actively using his fingers to be typing us over some of these comments. So I appreciate him engaging with us. For those of you that are hopping on, we've got our Mayor Pro Tem David DeMott, who's given us updates on last week, what's coming up on the agenda this week for City Council, some updates around enforcement, all the way to upcoming events like the Brewfest and past events like Top Taco. We're now taking up any comments or questions that you might have. So if you've hopped on and had a thought, or we're hoping that we would touch on something, now would be the time for you to ask. Otherwise, we'll just pepper him with any additional comments that we come up with or we see from our previous viewers. Now, Dave is asking, and I think this is more for clarity, right? We're talking about licensing animals, especially if you're a pet owner. What does that look like if you're going to another jurisdiction that does require a license, or somewhere that does require that you have something that you don't necessarily have to have in the community that you reside in or in on a daily basis? How does that affect the pet owner?
That's a good question. I mean, when you go into another jurisdiction, we don't necessarily have any authority over it. I don't know what that looks like, and I think it would probably vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction whether or not they want to, you know, I don't want to be mean about it, but if they want to get pushy with you about it, I don't know what we could do about that, but I would be happy to follow up. I don't know, how that's typically looked at, because I know here in Colorado people do like to travel with their dogs, so I'm not positive on an answer for that. I imagine if it has rabies tags, that's going to be what most of them look at first. But as far as a dog license, I don't know. I suppose that they could, but that question did not come up, and ultimately we wouldn't have any control over that. But I'd be happy to follow up on that and get an answer from our animal management. I would say part of the process was they did talk to neighboring jurisdiction animal management. So I guess it depends on how far you go too. You could go to another state and we're in a whole different ball game. So
right, yeah. So many factors that are around this, and I think you spoke to that, Mayor Pro Tem, when you shared that this is a statewide type of the ability has been given statewide, and I would think, when we go back and look at some of these more specifics, that some of that language can hopefully speak to that and clarify it. So otherwise, we'll bring that question up for folks in some other venue or capacity. So Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to switch over now that we've talked about our past meeting, the upcoming one that's coming up as well, to some of your own community outreach that you do. I know that you're out in the community personally outside of your obligations as the counselor here in our community. Were there any upcoming events that you have that you wanted the public to be aware of?
Yeah, so we just had last week our Policy and Pilsner that I do at Cocopelli, which is the third Tuesday of every month is what we're doing this year. And some years I switched that to the fourth, but this year it's the third Tuesday of every month. and that's basically from 6:30 to about 8:30. And basically an opportunity to come sit with me and and community members, folks who sometimes come that haven't been before are expecting a presentation. We don't really do presentations or speeches. It's just come ask questions, talk to your neighbors, hang out with us, enjoy a good local business, and patron them. They are really good to our community in general. So I like to try to do things in businesses where we can showcase them. But just a good opportunity to come and sit. There's typically electeds from different levels. You had mentioned earlier Commissioner Kraft Tharp. She sometimes will join. Juliet has joined before. Dave Carpenter usually comes by, and then the mayor usually comes by there, and some of the council members, depending on what they have going on, they'll drop by and just kind of hang out. And if people have questions about what's going on, it's a good opportunity to have that one-on-one conversation. And I really advocate for people coming, whether you don't like what we're doing or you do like what we're doing. That's an opportunity for a two-way conversation. I know oftentimes public comment during our meetings is very important, but that's not a two-way conversation. We can hear from you and we can get you feedback, and we can take it into account as we make decisions. But if you really want to have kind of that back and forth dialogue, that's one opportunity. Obviously, I shared my phone number and my email. I'm always open to trying to schedule something that works on people's time. I know just last weekend, I sat and had coffee with a resident to talk about their individual circumstances, and that's something that I believe most council members will do. But it's something that I always have done since I've been in this position, and will continue to do so. Being accessible is really important if we're going to understand the public's concerns, and so those are some opportunities to meet with me.
Absolutely. And I think you said that super well. For those people that are feeling like, oh, I do want to be involved, but what am I stepping into? I like that you have created this opportunity that they know they're coming to something that's very low key and casual, that they can voice their opinion. And something that people are seeing is that you all are a lot more active and out in the community and available to them, not only outside of the events that you're tabling at, but showing up to those and having a space as council. I know that has been a very targeted effort by you all, and I think that's been well received by the general public as well.
Yeah. Yep, I appreciate that. I think it's very important for most of us that we want to be out at those events that our staff are running, and being just as accessible. Our staff works very hard on those events to put them on, so it's important. The other thing I'd mention at my things, you typically will also get a lot of people from the different boards and commissions, because I really recommend those folks showing up too. So you might run into people from the Environmental Advisory Board or the Inclusivity Board. So it's a great opportunity just to talk to people and find out how to get more involved.
And for those individuals that are tuned in, whether it's now or later, we did speak to ways that you can contact Mayor Pro Tem DeMott. His phone number is included in the chat section. I've also pulled it up on the screen for you as well, so you can be able to see that. And his direct email has also been displayed on the screen for us. It's also in the chat for you to be able to reference later if you have any questions, whether it's about the content we've just shared or just in general as someone who either lives, frequents, or works in our community. I know Mayor Pro Tem DeMott is readily available and checking and trying to be as responsive as possible. Mayor Pro Tem, was there anything else that you didn't speak to that you were hoping to get out there before we wrap it up for the day?
Nope, I think we're good and we're on time as always.
I know, yeah, we cranked it all out of here, and it's a Monday that's hotter than heck. So I'd imagine people are going to be tuned in on here, or in the comfort of their workspace with air conditioned, fully blasted. Thank you all so much for tuning in with us, whether it's now or later. We appreciate you being a part of our broadcast, and we'll be back on here, of course, on Wednesday to speak to you and introduce one of our other newer partners. So thank you so much again for tuning in. And Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.